Welcome to In or Out, the new European Ultimate Federation show about the club rankings. I'm Ravi Vasudevan here hosting the show for the first time. It's a new show, trying this out for the first time. It's the idea is basically the whole season has this new setup where to qualify for the EUCF, you have to do well in the rankings. So we thought we put the show together so that every time there's kind of a new set of rankings released, I can break down the rankings for you and explain maybe who's in, who's out, who's qualified for EUCF at the moment, who needs to get some points, who's on the edge. And we can just dive deep. I'm going to do it anyways, so why not do it in front of a crowd? We're going to be using the ranking app that I've developed. I'll be showing that to you in a moment. And I'm going to hopefully have some guests on in the coming shows. This first episode, we're going to just look through the ranking app and go through the ranking algorithm a bit so you nerds out there can understand a bit how everything works. So you can really calculate exactly what you need to do to qualify for the EUCF. Also, we'll be answering any questions the chat throws out at me. So feel free, whether you're on Solid Sports or on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. I think that's all the places where we're streaming. Feel free to shout something out. Already see somebody giving some Eurozone recommendations. For those who don't know me, I've been the host of a podcast called Eurozone, was for many years over on Ultiworld. I've done a lot of ultimate commentary. I'm also involved with the European Ultimate Federation on the competition committee and ranking committee, and doing a bunch of stuff to help to develop this ranking system and this new format. So hopefully knowledgeable enough to answer all your questions. And yeah, we'll see what we can do. Couple of housekeeping notes before we get into the ranking and everything like that. First of all, if you haven't yet, make sure you remind your national federation that the master rosters for the EUCS, for the European Ultimate Club season, is due March 31st. So upcoming this weekend. Make sure your national federations get that out there. I know we're missing a few of them, but I think most of them are in by now. Also, remember that you have to submit your event rosters in time. So if you're playing at an EUCS event like the Spring Tour events in April, make sure those tournament rosters are submitted 2 weeks before the event. If you're playing some EUF approved tournament, make sure that it's submitted 1 week before that event. And if you're playing some single game that you want to have counted, make sure it's submitted the day before that event. And also make sure that your opponent submits it the day before that event. We already had some Italian teams that wanted to have some games count a couple weeks ago, but only one team submitted their roster. The other team didn't, so we can't actually count that. That's the way it goes. If we don't get a submitted roster for a non-EUF official event, we just don't count it. So both teams have to submit it. That's also something I was told to remind people that what are the rules for games counting? Well, if you're playing at an EUCS event like the Spring Tour or Elite Invite or the Summer Tours, all those games are going to count because those are EUCS events officially run by the EUF. So we know that both teams want those to count. If you're going to an EUF approved tournament, like let's say Tom's Tourney or French Mixed Nationals, which just happened this past weekend, or whatever else, it only counts when both teams have submitted tournament rosters and are both playing with a subset of their master rosters. So it's kind of an opt-in situation. You can't force a game to count if your opponent doesn't want it to count. Both teams have to want to do it that way. Might change that in the future, but for the first year, we wanted to make it a bit flexible for everybody. And that's that. Think that's it for housekeeping. So yeah, keep those questions coming in the chat if you want to interact with me. And I think we will just go forward and open up the ranking app so I can show you what that looks like. So you can get to this ranking app by going to ranking.ultimatefederation.eu, and this little app will pop up. I'll get through all the ins and outs of the app in a second, but first I wanted to walk through a bit about how the algorithm works. I'm not going to go through all the math here. You can read this yourself, but just so everyone really understands what's happening. If you go to this app, click on the algorithm tab, you can find it there, and you can see this explanation yourself as well. So the purpose of the algorithm is to rank the teams and qualify them for the EUCF. You can either qualify to the EUCF by winning a wild card, which is either one of the summer tours, not the spring tours. There's no wild cards at the spring tours, either one of the summer tours or the elite invite. The winners of those tournaments automatically go to the EUCF, so long as they have 10 ranked games. Every team has to have 10 ranked games. If you win a wild card and don't have your 10 ranked games, you don't get to go either. So make sure you get your wild card, get your 10 ranked games, then you're in. Otherwise, then the rest of the bids are based on rankings, and there's 16 bids per division. So, for example, in the mixed division, there are 4 wild cards, 3 summer tours, and the elite invite. So that means that the top 12 teams outside of these wild card teams will qualify, right? And so it's same for the women's division. In the open division, it's only the top 10 teams outside of the wild card teams that qualify. So a bit about how this algorithm works. It's pretty much the same as the USAU ranking algorithm, which has been explained in a couple other places. So you can click on those links here. There's only 2 differences if you're very familiar with that. The one is that USAU uses a recency bias. So games at the end of the season count more than the beginning of the season. In the EUCS, all games count equally. If you play a game in March, like the games that happened last week at Gentle Invite or French Nationals this past weekend, those count just the same as games that are played at Summer Tour the last weekend of the season. So that part we removed. And then the other difference is that in USAU, everyone starts out with 1,000. So that's kind of the center point of the rankings, whereas we start with 0. So basically, our scores vary between about negative 1,000 and positive 1,000 over a normal season. It can be a bit more or a bit less than that, but that's kind of the range that you're looking at. If you look at a USAU ranking, they're usually between 0 and 2,000. So if you want to get an equivalent of what this would look like if it was done with the USAU, just add 1,000 to the points and you'll see what it is. But in our ranking, like a 0 is basically the average team. It's a little bit more complex than that, but basically the midpoint team is about a 0. And if you're in the positive, you're in the upper half, and negative, you're in the lower half. Again, not exactly, but kind of there. So how does it actually work? The way it works is each game you play, you're going to get a score for that game. And the average of all your games you played is your strength, your rating. How is a game scored? Well, you take the rating of the opponent, and then you add or subtract a game rating difference. If you win the game, you add this game rating difference, and if you lose the game, you subtract the game rating difference. That game rating difference is calculated by this complex formula, which don't worry about it too much. It's some weird formula. Don't know exactly how they arrived at this one, but the point is that it has these important properties to it. The first is that each additional goal is worth more when games are close than when they're not. Every game that's a universe point game has the same differential of 125, no matter the game total. So like 10-11 or 15-14, that's all the same. The maximum differential you can get is 600. And a game will earn the maximum if and only if the winning score is more than twice the losing score. So if you are 15-7, you're over double your opponent's score. So then you're going to get 600. If you're 15-0, that's also still 600. So the way that looks, there's a table here that shows every score in the upper right here that shows if 15-14, that is a game difference of 125. 15-7, 600. And again, everything below 15-7 is also 600. And you can also see the same for every single winning score if you want to see what that rating would be like. You can also see a plot of it here. And that I'll just show the 15 because that's the most common thing everyone sees. So here you see 15-14 is a score of 125, and that gradually gets a bit flatter, and then you end up at 600 at 15-7, and then everything from 15-7 down is 600 points. So that's the game rating difference. Now, if you win, you add that difference to your opponent's ranking. So, for example, if you beat a team with a rating of 302 by 15-14, you would get a game rating of 427, which is 302 plus 125. If you would lose 15-14, you would get a game rating of 177, which is 302 minus 125. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. There's also a game weighting, which basically is games are weighted differently if it's a low scoring game, because that's considered to be not as representative of a higher scoring game. But every game where the winning team scores at least 13 is counted fully. And every game that there's at least a combined score of 19 points. So, for example, a score of 11-8 or 11-9, anything that has 19 points or higher, if you add the two scores together, that's also counted fully. But anytime where the winning team scores less than 13 and the combined score is less than 19, that's weighed slightly less. And that's done by this formula. You can see here all these scores. 15, 14 is rated 1. And then if you get down here, you see some, a game of 10-8 would only have 97. So when it's just a weighted average, that game counts a little less than the games that are scored fully. And if you want to look at the plot of that weighting, that's also available here. And you can hover over anything and see the game of 4-2 would only be weighted 56% of what a full game would be. So that's done. So you get all these scores for every game you play, and then that's averaged. And then this calculation is done iteratively. So everybody starts, every time we run the calculation, we start everybody over at 0. We do this whole calculation for every opponent, and then we average it, and then we run it again with the new averages that were earned in the previous calculation the second time, and we run it again, and then we check, okay, is there convergence yet? No, teams are still moving around. Then we run it again with the new average, and we run it again, and that can happen sometimes 1,000 times or more, but then eventually it basically stops deviating too much, and then we say, okay, that's locked in. So it's just an iterative calculation. If you don't know the math behind that, don't worry about that. It's not that important. What is important, I think, to a lot of people is the blowout rule. And I know that for USAU, this is the rule that gets the most questions from everybody. So I'll try to do my best to explain exactly how it works. Like I said before, the best you can get is 600 points above your opponent or 600 points below your opponent if you get blown out by double the score or more. So doesn't that mean that if you play a team whose ranking is 600 points below you, that you'll get a reduced ranking even if you beat them 15-0? Yeah, that's true. So you can only hurt yourself by playing that game. But we have a way to kind of mitigate that with the blowout rule. And the way we do that is that if all the following conditions are met, that's the winning team has a rating of 600 points more than the losing team. First of all, you have to be that much better for the blowout to matter at all. The second is the winning team wins by more than twice the score of the losing team plus 1. Then it gets counted. So for a game to 15, you have to win by 15-6. If you win 15-7, you are equal to double the score plus 1. Double 7 plus 1, 14 plus 1, that's 15. So that would be a score of 600, but that counts no matter what. But if you beat a team 15-6 and you're 600 points above them, then the game gets blown out, as long as number 3 is also met, which is the winning team has at least 5 other results where results are not being ignored. So if you have you just need to make sure you have at least 5 games counted. If you only have 5 games in the system, then you can't get blowouts removed. So that's also incentive to play more games to make sure those get shut down. So if you are a top team and you're playing a game at an official tournament against a low team, and the score is like 13-6, 14-6, you got to play that game like it's universe point. You got to play those last points like it's universe point because you want to make sure that game gets blown out. Similarly, if you're a low team and you get 6 points on some really high team, you want to play really hard to get that 7th point because then it cannot be blown out and you'll probably get pulled up by that ranking. So this is a little bit of a weird thing, but once teams get to 6 points, that can be a very important thing for this algorithms. That's important for everyone to understand if the games are at 15. Little note here that if removing the multiple games that bring the winning team below 5 games, the first game removed are the ones that hurt the winning team the most. So whatever, that's a bit of an edge case, but something to note. Also here on this webpage, there's the source code for how this ranking algorithm is run. You can download it. If you know some Python, you can run it on some sample data. You can pull down the data and try it out for yourself and see what the ranking does with it. So we are, as EUF, are going to release official rankings periodically and update the rankings in this app so that you can see that. What I'm going to show you now is the app with data from 2023. But remember that in 2023, we didn't use an official ranking. We used EUCRs to qualify teams for EUCF, and teams were not treating like the earlier season tournaments as if there would be a ranking involved. So take this with a grain of salt. This isn't meant to say like that these teams are better than that team. It's just a way to use some example data to demonstrate how the ranking algorithm works and to show like what would have happened if that were the case. But of course, teams weren't doing it, so take that with a grain of salt. Another thing to keep in mind is that that was it. I can't remember. I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. We're doing this live, so that'll happen sometimes. Good. So this is the ranking app, and as I said before, go to ranking.ultimatefederation.eu. It works a little bit better on a desktop, but the mobile app still does work. I have an example of that running over here. If you get to this website on mobile, one thing I still need to maybe fix this UI a little bit because some people have told me that it's a bit unclear. You'll get this screen, which I'll explain in a bit. You can kind of filter out which division you want to look at, what season you want to look at, etc. And what you have to do if you want to look at the actual ranking data is just click on this little arrow on the upper left, and then everything will be revealed down here. And if you want to go to any of the other tabs, just click on this hamburger menu and you can see the team matchup algorithm, which I will explain all of that in a second. But I'm going to explain it using the app up here. So here is basically what you can see. There's there's 4 tabs that are currently in the app. I want to add one about events, but so far I haven't been able to get time to do that yet. So the season, the team, the matchup, and the algorithm. We already just went through the whole algorithm where this is just a big explainer. If you ever have questions about how the algorithm's calculated, it's just here for you. You can look at it. You can look at these plots. You can look at, a game to 12, see what it looks like and whatever, see how that is all affected. Season gives you kind of an overview of the season in different ways. So this is if you just want to look from a bird's eye view, you don't care about which team, you just want to see how the whole season is doing, you look to this tab. And all the results tabs, these first 3, I have these value boxes at the top, which show some kind of key values. And if you want to get them out of the way, because this looks very good on a 1920 by 1080 screen, but it doesn't look the best on smaller resolutions. So either zoom out on your browser, or you can always just click this and hide those value boxes to just look at if you just want to look at the data, that's there. So before I go into that data, I think it's good to first talk about the filters that on the left, which also you can hide if you want a bigger view of the data or the plots. That's fine. It's pretty self-explanatory. The first is which division you want to look at, mixed, open, or women. The second is the season. And right now it's only 2023 because we haven't put any 2024 data, even though there were a few games already played. Gentle Invite had a few teams playing for official ranking points, and French Mixed Nationals had some games this past weekend. But that's not really enough to put a whole ranking together, so we're not going to release the ranking just quite yet. So you'll be able to pick if you want to go look back on 2023, even when the 2024 data is there, you can do that. There's the ranking date. So like I said, we're going to publish rankings at different intervals. For the 2023 data, I calculated the rankings at 4 different moments. I did it right after Spring Invite, right after Elite Invite, after EUCR, and after EUCF. So in this example data, I included EUCF games. In seasons from now on, EUCF doesn't count towards the ranking because the ranking is used to qualify teams for EUCF. So probably this last one won't be there. Maybe we'll put it in there for fun just to see what the EUCF games do to it. But the important thing would be up to and including this last slot. Then finally, which teams are counted in ranking. You can either look at all the teams, which early season is probably the right thing to do. But if you're getting later into the season, remember that only teams with 10 games or more are counted. So if you think like, hey, there's some team that got lucky, went to one tournament, they had 6 good games, but doesn't look like they're going to play the rest of the games. I don't want to see them in my ranking. If you click greater than 10 games only, it'll filter out for only the teams that have those 10 games. So you can look at it in all those different ways. Okay, cool. So now let's look at what we can actually see. I think it's actually a little more clear if we go earlier in the season, because that'll get these blue potential bids there. So this is the rankings as they looked in the mixed division right after Spring Invite. So if you remember last year, which is a bit different than this year, Spring Invite had wildcards in them. If you won a Spring Invite, you got to go to UCF no matter what. So you can see here, and we will have this also in future seasons, even before wildcards are awarded, you'll know how many wildcards are there. So like there'll be 5 in the whole season. And at this moment, 3 out of the 5 have been awarded. So you can see down in the ranking, the teams that are in yellow, those teams have wildcards, and it'll even show you here which tournament they earned a wildcard at. In green, we have ranking bids. So the teams in the green and the ranking here have done well enough that they would, if they kept that ranking, they would earn a bid. But notice that in yellow, the entire team is in dark yellow. In green, the dark green is only the ranking, whereas it's kind of light green for the team, because this team hasn't guaranteed themselves a spot at UCF or anything just because they're green. It just means right now they're in a ranking spot. So this bid goes to the spot, not necessarily the team, whereas the yellow bid goes to the team, right? So Lemmings, Frub, Zoom, they've all won bids no matter what, whereas these teams are in the ranking, but they might lose it. So what's this blue thing about? Well, that's potential bids. So remember that you get there will be 5 bids get granted to wildcards. So that means that only 3 of them have been awarded. So there are still 2 wildcards yet to be given out. So ranking spots 15 and 16 are not really safe. I mean, they're still in the top 16 at the moment, but if a team outside the top 16 wins a wild card, which if you'll see in the way the rankings evolve in the mixed division, you'll see what happens there, then spots 15 and 16 aren't safe. So green is kind of like a safe zone. If you're in that ranking position, that is where you would definitely qualify for the UCF. Blue is a potential bid zone. You could qualify for the UCF there if the final 2 wildcards go to the top 16, or that the teams that have wildcards stay in the top 16. If any wildcards go outside the top 16, those blue bids aren't safe. So that's the difference between blue and green. And you'll see here, if you go to the end of the season in mixed, that indeed there were 5 wildcards were awarded. So Reading, Disconnection, and Lemmings, and Frub, they all won wildcards. But if you notice, the green bids only go up to ranking spot 15. Why is that? Shouldn't there be 16 teams that go to the ECF? Well, there actually are. But if you scroll down a bit, Zoom Ultimate, there was a special EUCR in Istanbul that kind of was a development bid at that time. But so Zoom Ultimate won that bid, but they ended up 32nd in the ranking. So that's why there's only 15 spots here. So it'll be these 15 teams plus Zoom. That could happen, that some team wins some tournament for a ranking, a wildcard bid, and ends up below. So that's why, yeah, that 16th spot, Pelt here, they're pretty upset because, yeah, they probably would. They demonstrated they were the better team over the course of the season, but they didn't get the wild card. That's just how it works. So, yeah, that's basically it. The yellow teams, again, to recap, yellow teams are the ones that are definitely in. Green ones are ranking spots that are definitely in. And blue ones are potential ranking bids, but not totally safe because they are, yeah, they could be taken away by wildcards. All right. So what's next? Next is games. And games, I think it's better to look at the end of the season to see something there, because that's an important thing to note. So here's it's just a giant table of all the games that are counted. If you're looking for a specific team, there'll be a better way to look at that. I'll show you in a second, but this is just a way to view anything. If you want to search, just search through the table of all games. Like if you want to see all the Elite Invite games, you can just search for Elite and it'll pop up here. If you want to look for a specific team, you can look for Hrutz, for example, and then all the Crit games will pop up there. So you can just search through all the games. If you just want to see any individual game, you get a little bit of data on each game, the score of the game, the tournament, when the game happened. The game rating diff, remember, that's the thing that goes between 0 if it's a draw, because for Windmill, we have to let draws be in there, but everyone else doesn't have draws. But generally from 125 to 600, just the game rating diff. The team rating difference, which is the difference in rating between the two teams, and then whether the game is counted or not. And so some of these games are in red or pink, and they have a no under counted. And that's because this game was in the blowout rule. So if you see this, Disconnection versus Honeymoon, the team rating difference is more than 600, and they got 15-6. If that had been 15-7, this game would have counted, and then you would have seen that Disconnection would have been brought down and Honeymoon would have been brought up. But because they managed to get a 15-6, this game got not counted from the rankings. Same thing here with this one, another 15-6 game. And again, yeah, as long as this number is greater than 600 and this score is 15-6 or higher, then the games will get blown out as long as they have the 5 games there. So you can look and see there's a few games that get discounted. This is a game that was 9-3 that got discounted, but same thing. It's at least more than 3 times 3 is 6, so 7. As long as it's more than 7, then that still counts. Yeah, so that's the games. Pretty straightforward there, just a way to search through all the games. Evolution. Now remember, this is the evolution of the season. There's another evolution plot in the team. We'll get to that in a second, but this is the evolution. And what this shows is how the top 16, or if you want to look at the top 10 or top 5 or top 20, you can put any number here you want. You can change that around. How the top 16 evolved over time. And there's 2 ways to look at that. I'll also note here that there's the blue line is the top 16, and the green line is how many actual ranking bids there are. So again, there's only 11 ranking bids, so there's a bit of a gap. If you want to be in the guaranteed ranking spot, you should be above the green line. If you want to be above the top 16, you should be above the blue line. So that's all that is. So you can hover over teams here and see who's there. So you see at the end of the season, Krut was in first place, then Deep Space, and it goes all the way down to Pelts. This is the top 16. But maybe you want to see, this is basically taking the top 16 now and tracking back how they evolved over the season. Maybe you want to see a bit more. Maybe you want to see how the top 16 looked like throughout the whole season. You click on entire season here, and that'll populate every team that was ever in the top 16 and where they went throughout the season. So you can see here, this is a team, Zombies. They did really well early on. Probably this was, and you'll see a lot of teams here. This was before Elite Invite happened, so a lot of the elite teams weren't even there yet. So some teams were there, but you see Zombies did pretty well. Then as results came in, they went a little worse, went down to 29th place, and then went down to 42nd and stayed at 42nd place even after the UCF. So this is just a way to kind of look at the season overall. Here, there are only 4 ranking spots. In 2024 season, we'll have way more than 4. But it's just a cool way to track what's going on in the season. Last thing to show is the connections. I don't recommend using this on mobile, at least on my phone. It seems to like freeze my phone. I used a package here to make this part that was, I didn't design the thing that makes the graph, but apparently that graph thing works really well on desktop, but on mobile, it's a little weird. So I wouldn't recommend opening this tab on your phone, but do so at your own risk. But it works totally fine on mobile, on PC. So, or on desktop, sorry. So what this is a graph of all the connections of all the teams. You can zoom out just with the scroll wheel. And so you can take here, for example, Krut and who they played over the whole season. It's just kind of a little fun tool to see how the whole season is connected. And it's a good way to see how evolved the season is, because at the end of the season, we hope that with all our stuff in place, that it's one big network. Everybody is connected at least through one game, hopefully more. The more connected and messy this looks, the better the algorithm is, because that's the more connections that are throughout everything. What's fun is if you look at an earlier point in the season, so right after Spring Invite, at this point, there were basically only 2 tournaments that happened. And I'm still trying to figure out a way so that this displays by default like this. But if you start pulling stuff apart, like here, you can see there's actually 2 different clusters together, which actually means that the algorithm can't really compare teams here to teams here because they're not connected in any way. So although there is a ranking, it's not really fair because it's treating this basically as one ranking and this is another ranking, and then where you fall in either of those are compared to each other, but there's no connection there. So you can see when you're looking at the ranking at this connections graph is not, it's just a fun extra way to see how developed we are throughout the season. And I think that's pretty fun. Okay. So that's it for the season. These are all the things you can look at from the bird's eye view, checking out what's going on with the whole season. If we go to the next tab, we can go to a team, and you can also get to a team, by the way, by clicking on one of the teams here. I tried to make it so basically anywhere where there's a team name, I think except for the connections plot or any of the plots, but anywhere where there's a table and the team's name is there, it should be clickable so you can go to the team page. And the team page, you can also select any team from the division here. You can look at Crits or whatever. Crit had not played yet at this point of the season, so let's go to the end of the season. It's a bit nicer to look over there. Crut or Deep Space or any other team. So again, I start with all these pages. I start at the top with a few key values. The team has the most of them, and I might reduce this by one because this really doesn't look that great on slightly smaller screens than full HD. But here's what I'm showing so far. If you think there's something else you would rather see at the top here, like something you really want to be quickly visible or calculated about your team, let me know. I'm definitely looking for feedback on how to make this app more useful for everybody. So hit me up if you want to do that either in the chat now or people. I think you can find a way to contact me later. So the first box is just the rank, where they are in the ranking at this point in the season. Deep Space, even though they won a UCF, they were still second ranked throughout the whole algorithm. It shows your rating, which is just their score, 622.9. Their record, so 14-3. They had 14 wins and 3 losses. This SOS, which is the strength of schedule. By the way, if you see any of these little eye bubbles, feel free to mouse over them. It should just explain what's going on. And that's the average strength of their opponent. So you can see how tough your schedule was compared to another team's. And then this is I think a pretty important one for everybody. This is the amount of ranking points to the EUCF cutoff. So there will be some cutoff where below that ranking you're not in the EUCF anymore, and above that ranking you are. If you see a negative value, that means that you are currently qualified for the EUCF. That's the amount of points you can lose and still be an EUCF team. So they're 622.9. The cutoff, I guess, is about somewhere around 100 and a little over 100. So they could still lose 507 points and be in the EUCF. If you take another team, let's see, I know a team that didn't quite make it, Catch Up Mixed. They have a rating of negative 198.99, and that means they have to gain 315 points to make it to the EUCF. So that's a nice little tool to see basically how far away you are, how many ranking points you need to get at your next tournament to get yourself into that qualifying position. There's a little settings thing here for the advanced users out there. You can include or not include the potential bids. So remember that I had in blue here these potential bids. So if I go to the beginning of the season and go to a team, because that won't work at another point here. Let's go to a team that had played already. Let me check here in the season. Who has played let's go to Transylvania Ultimate. They've played. I can just click on them, of course. So they've played. And let's say they're about to go into their next tournament in the beginning of the season. They can say, I need 162 ranking points to get into those green bids, those like EUCF cutoff bids. If you want to include the potential bids because you're fairly sure that the top 16 is safe, you can do that. And you see that it's a bit smaller. They only need to get 10 ranking points to get in the top 16. But if they want to be super safe, they can unclick that 162. So I hope that makes sense. If that's unclicked, then it's how much you need to do to get here. It's in the top 14 to how well they need to do to get over Owls. If you have that ticked off, it's how many they need to go to get over the zombies so they can get into the top 16. So that's a little way you can play around depending on which way you want to look at it. By default, it's seeing how much to get into the safe space. Good. So What else can you see when you look at a team? You can see all the team's games. Let's go to the end of the season again, so it's a little more interesting. This is a really cool view of all the team's games for the whole season, and you see them, from this team. Transylvania Ultimate seems to have played at the EUCR in Istanbul, and also the Spring Invite in Wrocław. And you can see all their games and who they played and whatever. So if you're scouting a team that you're going to play against, you can also look at that here. If you're just looking at your favorite team, you can do that here. Let's take a look at, Disconnection, for example. You can see also which games are counted or not in a team. So I think, you could also look in the season and search for it, or just click on the team and see all the games here. This also shows you some more data that's relevant to the team. So the game rating. So this is not the game rating difference, this is the game rating. This is basically your opponent's score plus your game rating difference. So that's shown here. The opponent's rating, and that's also the tournaments that are played, when they were played, if it's counted, yes or no. So that's the games there. And again, the little I thing here says that the games in red are not counted because fall under the blowout rule. It's all good. Another thing you can look at, this gets a little more advanced. This is a plot of all the games you've played. Also, little pro tip here. Some of these cards, if you don't want to see all this stuff around and you want to see it in full screen, you click on expand here and it'll show the whole thing in full screen. It can be a plot or a table or whatever. That's also a little fun trick that we have there. If you go to a plot, so this one is a bit harder to get from an intuition point of view, but I'll explain it here, and it'll be for the more nerdy among you. I think we'll get something out of this. I think most of you will probably just use the season and the games and the matchup, which I'll show shortly. I think a lot of people are going to use that one, but this is if you really want to dig down on your data and see how well did I play. You know what? Sometimes when you play a game, and after the game, you're like, man, we could have done way better than that. Or man, we played that we really played out of our minds. But it's hard to judge whether that's actually true. How true is that according to the whole set of data? How close was that game to your average? Maybe that's a good way to look at things. So each dot on this plot is a game. X's are games that didn't count. So they're still plotted, but they got, because of the blowout rule, they don't count. So that's just what the X's and the dots are. These are box plots. For those of you who know a bit of your stats, you can look at the median, the quartile. Each box represents a tournament. So you can see here for Disconnection, they played Spring Invite Padova, they played Elite Invite, and they played the EUCF. That's where all their games were. You can see that their performance at Spring Invite was not that good relative to the algorithm compared to the performance at EUCR, at Elite Invite and EUCF. Elite Invite and EUCF, pretty even. Their median was a bit higher in both of them, but you can look and see how that was. You can also see the cutoffs here. So and that also in earlier parts of the season will also have the blue thing for the potential bids versus the cutoff. But of course, at the end of the season, there are no more potential bids because all the wild cards were given out. So that's not there. But you can see here that game, they beat the Zombies 14-8, but that's actually below this top 16 cutoff. So they should have beaten them by a bit more than that, actually, by the way the algorithm went. This game, they're pretty lucky that got the blowout counted, that they got that 15-6, because you see if it was 15-7, it would have been an even worse score, and that would have been that's like, even for Disconnection, who's a top 4 team, that's below average, that score against Honeymoon. Sorry to Honeymoon, but that's that could have really pulled them down, but it didn't count because of the blowout. So you can see in this tournament where the median score is, and there's the dotted line, which represents the mean of your score, which is basically your ranking. You see 470.1107, the same as 470.11 that's listed up here. So you can look at individual games here, and actually a cool example that I had was looking at my own team from last year, which is UFO. And this is a fun thing that I saw, because we were a 31st ranked team last year, not top of the table, not really in the running for an EUCF bid, I would say. But interestingly enough, we only played one tournament. If you look at, we had 3 of our games that were above the EUCF cutoff, And I actually remember, because from myself, that these 3 games were our pool play games, and these 3 games are our bracket play games. And I do remember feeling like, yeah, pool play, we felt pretty good, and bracket play, yeah, I feel like we could have done better in that game. Like, this is the game we lost, first bracket play game we lost, and we continued to lose games in the bracket. And it seemed like, yeah, we just weren't playing to the same potential we played the day before in pool play. And this kind of shows that that's true. If we had played as well as we played in pool play for a whole season, we actually were a top 16 team in Europe. We were above that green UCF cutoff. But these games down here really pulled us down. I mean, way below zero. So you see that our average is below zero. We were worse than the average team. And yeah, this is just a cool way you can break down and look at data. So that's the plot of your games. Next is evolution. So I'll look at a team that's a bit more interesting. I'll go back to mixed again. Evolution of a team. So we can look at let's do disconnection again, because they might not have moved that much, but we'll see how they changed. This just basically shows how your ranking evolved over time. And I've already gotten a request from Ashio, who's also, I mean, maybe watching this on one of our streams, to look at the evolution graph of the rating over time to see, because that might be a bit more interesting. But right now it's just ranking. I'll probably add rating in a little bit. But you can see here when all the rankings were calculated, how that looks over time. So you see here they were second place after spring invite. Then after elite invite, they dropped down to 5th, dropped down to 8th after the UCR, but then at UCF they played well and put themselves back up to 4th. Yeah, so that's the evolution plot. Very simple, just to see how your team did over time. So the last tab, which I think is one that's going to be super popular, I'm definitely going to use it for my team throughout the middle of the season, is the matchup tab. So the matchup tab allows you to take any 2 teams and see a lot of data between those 2 teams. It's also a super helpful tool for commentators. So I definitely think that they're going to be used there. So these are 2 random teams that, well, not random, they're alphabetical. This is a Polish team versus an Italian team, AUTB Fire. And what you see here is it'll calculate the rating difference between those 2 teams, and then it reverse calculates from that equation to figure out what the expected score is between those 2 teams. So you'll see here that the algorithm predicts a score of 15 to 12.13. So one way you could use this is if you're going into a tournament and you want to look at your matchup and you're like, I want to improve my ranking. How well do I have to do to improve my average? Of course, it depends a little bit on how your opponents do, so it's not an exact calculation, but this is a good baseline for like, okay, if I'm this team from Poland, I'm like, okay, the algorithm expects me to win by 12.13. We need to gain a few ranking points, so we need to do better than 15-12 in order to improve our ranking. Same thing for the Italian team. They could look at it the other way and say, oh, we're predicted to lose 12-15. So if we do better than that, we'll improve our ranking. So it's just a way to do that. Another cool aspect of this tool. So I'll take the top 2 teams from last year, Hrut versus Deep Space. You can also see all the games between those 2 teams that happened all season. So if you're curious, you're watching a live stream, you want to see, hey, have these teams matched up before? Well, you can put them into this matchup tab and you can see exactly how they look. And they played each other 3 times in the season, twice at Elite Invite and once at UCF. You see, Crit got them 15-8, beat them 13-11, but in the UCF final, as we all know, Deep Space took the title, won 12-13. So it's a nice way to just like see what's going on between 2 teams. But it does not stop just there. You can also use this mutual tab. And what this mutual tab does is looks at all the games between mutual opponents. And I think that's pretty cool because you can see, okay, we both played Glasgow. We both played 15-5, so we're about equal. We both played Lemmings. Crit beat them 15-10. They beat them 12-7. So you can see, like, you know, they can be these aren't the same tournament, but it's like looking at how did we do against that opponent compared to how did they do against that opponent. Just a little bit of extra way to filter the data so you can look and see how everything went and compare yourself to a different team. Yeah, a couple things to explain about this. Why does this show up as a draw? Basically, the rating difference between Krut and Deep Space was only 10 ranking points. Now, remember, 125 is a universe point win. So there can be teams where let me try disconnection here. Maybe that'll be close enough. No, let me try Deep Space versus disconnection. Okay, that's not cool. I'll find one maybe eventually, but there can be a 15, 14 or closer. But if you have within 45 ranking points of each other, that actually rounds. It goes to 14.99 and higher. So it's so close that we just show it as a draw here. So Deep Space versus Krut is a draw between the two teams. So anytime there's less than 45 points of difference between the two teams, it shows up as a draw. Similarly, if there's 600 points or more, I decided we can't really tell what that score would be because everything between 15.7 and 15.0 is the same 600 point difference. So if you would take, I don't know, take a random team versus Krut's DTU, it just says blowout. There was a difference of 853 points. That's more than the 600 points minimum. So it won't show a score here. The scores will only be showing if it's 15.7, 15.8 or higher. If it's more than that, it's just going to show blowout because we can't really predict a score with the 600 or higher. So that's the matchup tab. And yeah, I think this is a really fun tool for comparing teams throughout the season, and also a really useful tool for players and team admins to figure out, like, should we how well do we need to do? So maybe if you see that score, it's getting close to there, you might have you might start putting in power lines because you want to, beat the algorithm more or less. All right, that's everything I've implemented in this app. I have access to all this ranking data. If you're a data nerd out there, or even if you're not, if there's something else you would want to be able to quickly learn from the rankings, please let me know. I can try to implement it into this app, and then everybody can access it. I just want this tool to be useful for everyone in the EUF, sorry, both fans and commentators and players and captains. So anything you would be like, oh, it'd be really cool if it showed this, let me know. I really like doing this, making this project. So I'm happy to bring up some more stuff. Okay. So just quickly having a look here. That's basically all I wanted to show. So I'll spend. We have another 9 minutes or so left in the show. We can go even a bit longer, but Instagram, if anyone's watching there, that will cut off at exactly an hour. That's all they allow on live streams, though. And so I'll take some questions if anyone has any. We got one question from one of the chats asking if the blowout rule is applied after the iteration has converged or at each step in the iteration. I believe it's after the iteration has occurred. So it will still calculate everything out and then remove the blowout games and then calculate the average. I'm pretty sure about that. But yeah, in case that's wrong, I'll talk about it on the next show. It's a very good question. Very good question. Let's see, any other things. Also for this show in the future, like if we're going to show live rankings, if you want to learn about what is going on with your team and have me drill down, basically what I'm going to do each episode is look at this app, open this app up and say, okay, here's the teams that are in or out in each division. And here's how that happened. If you're like, hey, my team's here, where are we at? I will happily take any viewer that's live, click on your team and look at your data a bit more thoroughly, and do that for anybody. So feel free to get involved in the chat and get involved in the show. I'm really looking forward to also doing this show throughout this season. I'll wait a little bit longer. So let's play a little bit more with the data. We can see how the women's division looked. Yeah, women's division is interesting because I got some questions about this. Is that how did a team with negative points qualify for the EUCF? Well, again, remember that 0 is basically the halfway point. There were 30 teams in the women's division calculation last year, so the 0 point was between teams 13 and 14, about half. Again, a little bit off of half, but So a negative doesn't mean like something crazy, it just means you're a bit below the average team. And since there are since there are 30 teams, that's it. Okay, yeah, got another note from my producer Nemo here. One more thing that we wanted to do on this show, I'll probably open with this next time. Sorry about that. Is that we're going to show highlights throughout the season, and so I'm gonna show that here. How we're gonna do that, and yeah, basically I'm gonna do these shows typically the Monday after big ranking events. So the next show is going to be after Spring Tour. And so if we have any highlights from the Solid Sport coverage, we'll also do like a short little highlight package. So I'll cue that up. Nemo, why don't you cue that up and show this highlight we have from the yeah. Great. Sorry about that. I mean, Freesby is against Gentle at the Gentle invite. And Freesby's actually won this game, but it didn't count because Gentle didn't want to make it count, so they didn't submit a roster for this event. You see that little give go into power position. Great put into space. Looks like it's too far, and he's got it. So yeah, the Bees went on to win that tournament. Really cool for them. Or actually, I don't know if they won that tournament. That wasn't a finals round robin. But yeah, that game didn't count for the UCS. Still good for the boys from Bruges to get that win out. Got a question here from John Doc. What if you have 12 UCS ranking games, but you had 4 blowouts? You'd still make the 10-game rule, right? But your score would be average 8 games that counted. Is that it? That's exactly correct. You don't get penalized for winning blowouts or losing blowouts. That's not something teams can control. So as long as you have 10 games in the system, you are good to go. Even if some of them become blowouts, that doesn't matter. That doesn't hurt you. It's just the average is calculated under the non-blown out games. Stick around for a couple more minutes. I think Nemo wants me to say one more thing about the discount period, but I actually don't know what he means by that. So wait for him to explain that one. When is the cutoff date for qualifications for Euros, and when will you find out if you made Euros? Okay, so that's another question. The cutoff date for the qualification for Euros is the weekend after the last UCS event, which I believe is the summer tour in August. I'll check the calendar here. Yeah, summer tour, August 18th. This is the last date that you can could use to have a ranking event count. We will be calculating the rankings this week, in this week of August. We'll probably be running them on Monday. I will do a show Monday night, and that will reveal which teams qualified for UCF. So this is the date when you would know, August the 19th. The next question, new calculations conducted are only newly played games or all games considered in the new calculation. We start over. Every time we start over, every time we start the calculation over, with every team starting at 0 and we run it, we do the whole iteration with the whole data set every time. So yeah, basically gets reset. But again, as the season goes on, those games are a smaller part of the whole data set. So I hope that answers the question. All games are reconsidered again, starting from 0. Liam Grant asks which episode of Eurozone this is and why isn't there a funny Irishman? Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Liam. We'll get you on We'll get you on one of these shows for sure. Although if we want a funny Irishman, we should get Lorcan. If you beat a team at the start of the season and they do very well afterwards, this positively affect your rating. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So every point counts. Even if they beat you, if you're close to them, it will positively affect you. Unless they blow you out, if they beat you by 15-6 or more, and then you end up not as good as them, then it won't help you. Yeah, because it won't be counted in the blowout rule. What were the criteria for a tournament to count again? All right. So for a tournament to count, basically the tournament has to apply for EUF approval, and you can go if you go to the EUF eucs.ultimatefederation.eu. If you click on events calendar, you can see all the events that are counted here in this nice little calendar app. You see windmills there, London Invites there. There's some weekends with many tournaments there. So basically, it's just the tournament organizer has to say, can we get approved? For them to get approved, it has to be 7-on-7. It has to be on grass or turf. They have to play by the gender rule A for mixed. They have to use gender pulling rule for mixed. And I believe that's basically it. The game has to be at least 60 minutes long. So if there are tournaments with really short games, we don't count those. And the games can't be to more than 15. So if the games are to 13, that's still fine. If the games are to lower than that, that's also fine. But remember that the really low scoring games are weighted a bit differently, a bit less. So you probably want to get the games all the way to 13 or 15 so that they can count as much. That's it. And then it's just up to, if you want your games to count for that tournament, if you're a player or a team admin, you have to get your roster in on time. So that's a week before any EUF approved tournament, 2 weeks before any EUF official tournament, and 1 day before any single game. For a single game to count, you have to have rosters submitted. Both teams that are playing have to have rosters submitted the day before the game, and then the score has to be submitted. So that's how that works. All right, we got about 1 more minute on Instagram. So, yeah, Nemo wanted me to say the season pass will be discounted before the spring tour. So if you want to get a discount on your Solid Sport pass, go to live.ultimatefederation.eu or solidsport.com and purchase your UF season pass, UCS season pass, and it'll be a bit discounted. So don't miss out on that if you want to get all the live coverage you're going to have all year. I think the Instagram people have already been cut off, so sorry about that. But thanks for tuning into this first episode of In and Out. I'll be here the Monday after spring tour to break down all the rankings and every major part of the event for the rest of the year. Looking forward to it, and see you in the next one.